Okay, welcome everybody. This is Chantel Lopez, and I'm here with my brilliant co-host, Ann Bishop. Hi, Ann. Looking
Hello.
lovely, always in her red lipstick. I'm so jealous because I can't do that. I can't pull that off. But today it's episode 53, and it's a special episode because we don't usually have guests on the podcast. But today we're here with Alex Raymond, and Alex is the, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to use a bunch of different words, founder, creator, host of the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, and also the Conscious Entrepreneur Podcast.
Yeah, that's right. I call myself the host of the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Ann and I met Alex last year at the summit in Boulder, Colorado, and we were, as an embodied business, in business, we think of ourselves as nervous system or polyvagal informed. We're very conscientious about the way we build our business and our teams and our community. And when Ann shared it with me originally, I was like, she's like, what about next year? I was like, how about this year? And I think it was maybe already like only a month and a half away. So we scrambled and we made it happen. And we're very glad that we did. It's such a beautiful gathering of people. So thank you for that. And we've got another one. You've got another one coming up here, May 28th and 29th. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to start with what's in process and what's in progress, as we always do. And I'm going to turn it over to Ann. So when I introduce, Ann has to go first and vice versa.
All right.
What's in process, what's in progress, Ann?
Absolutely. So this morning and last night, I was thinking of all the things that I needed to do today. And as someone who is balancing caretaking roles with also being an entrepreneur for over 25 years now, today, I was thinking about how I wanted to spend some time with my mom, as her health is not as good as it has been, and my father sometimes needs a break from that. And so, one of the things that is most what I really leaned into today was what we share at our business is called Mental Health Mondays, where we're able to sort of ease into our week instead of easing into it operationally so much. And that allows us to get some deep work done and focus. And it allows me just to balance those needs. And so I really appreciated the time. And after this podcast recording, my mom's going to come over and I'm going to spend some time with her.
Oh, I'm so good. So
Great.
Good, Ann.
Yeah.
I really have been noodling on this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X, and Ann and I have been talking a lot about it. Book written by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy, and Ben is going to be the keynote speaker at the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. And it's really, I was listening, I'd been reading it, and I was listening to it on a drive down to Santa Barbara to do some teaching last weekend. And man, I don't know if you had this experience, Alex, as you were reading it, or Ann, as you were listening. Some of the things I was just like, this could not be more me, and I am a little embarrassed about it. You know, when something holds up a mirror and you realize it, not that you didn't realize it before, but you see it in different terms through, as Ben would probably say, a different frame. And so I've really just been thinking about that, and we'll get into maybe some more of the details. But the other thing too, this week, our weeks have been so busy and so full. And there was something I read on your website, Alex, that kind of hit home for me. And I think Ann will really appreciate it too. I'll read the quote in a little bit, but basically it was about not being able to find joy. And oftentimes when I am busy, especially when I'm single momming, which is every other week, and there's back-to-back things on the calendar, which is not very often, but when it does, and today I was just thinking, how do I lean into the little tiny moments of joy in between what feels a little overwhelming or a lot of prep to do or a lot of big things on the horizon in the next couple of days? And so I made one of my favorite breakfasts this morning, which was toast with peanut butter, sliced with cucumbers, red onion, and hot chili oil, which is such a funny thing, but that was great. And that made me really happy. Feels good to nurture yourself in the small ways, when life feels a little bit all consuming. So that's what's going on over here. How about for you, Alex?
Well, thanks for sharing, both of you. I am sitting in a call booth in Vail, Colorado. And the reason I'm in Vail, Colorado is because I just got done with an annual thing that I do with a number of friends. So I just had me and nine other guys. We were up at a backcountry hut in the Colorado wilderness for the last 2 days. So we started on Saturday morning, and we hiked up for 5 hours with our skis on, with 30, 40-pound backpacks each. We then spent 2 nights at a off-the-grid cabin at 11,000 feet. And then we just skied back down this morning, and I made it to this co-working space 30 minutes before this call. And so, as you might be able to therefore guess or assume, I haven't even taken a shower yet today. I haven't taken a shower since Friday. But here's what that means. What it means to me is it's such a nice experience for me to get together with male friends for the weekend, because it allows us to bond, to have great conversations, to step away from the things that we're doing on a normal basis or on a normal weekend. And everybody looks forward to this for the entire year. And there's no negotiation with families. There's none of that. Just like, this is happening, and we know months in advance like what the date's going to be. And so what it does is it really allows us to come together, get physical, because we're skiing and hiking all weekend long, and we were lucky the weather was beautiful, and just really feel very in our bodies. And so physical stress, also stress from not sleeping very well at high altitude, but just really I feel very glowing having spent all this really nice time with some friends. Gosh,
sounds amazing. Well, I'm impressed that you're here. Thanks for making that stretch, and that you sound coherent and and present. I don't know if I would after all of that. Well, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, thanks. It was.
Yeah. So we want to start just by letting people get to know you a little bit, and I want to read this quote from your website. You're talking about your journey, kind of the impetus for Conscious Entrepreneur. And you say, even when good things happened, like winning a new customer, receiving positive feedback, or hitting significant milestones, I couldn't find the joy inside me. I was stuck and couldn't find a way out. And, I think if all of the folks that are listening, certainly for me that landed, I have definitely been in that place. It's such a tough, bleak place to be. And in the work that Ann and I do, we talk a lot about joy-seeking behavior, creating safety from an embodied perspective. And so it just really resonated. And I wondered if you might say a little bit more about that and your journey into creating the Conscious Entrepreneur.
Happy to. Happy to. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, for probably over 15 years. And so I've been through ups and downs and ins and outs and successes and failures and so on of building a company. And what had happened to me there, and just to share a little bit of perspective, it wasn't until I got well into my 30s that I had one of these sort of head meet heart kind of experiences, and understanding what it really, this stuff felt like inside of my body. And so when I was building my previous company, which is called Capta, which is a software company, we had a lot of great things going for us. So, for example, we got into the TechStars program in Boulder, which is a well-known accelerator for software companies, and we raised money and all this stuff. And so there was a lot of support behind us and a lot of wind at our back, so to speak. And somehow I never was able to internalize that. Like I spent all my time, for example, comparing myself to everybody else who was in this, startup cohort, right? Oh, this person raised more money. This person has a sexier, more interesting product. This person has a bigger team. Whatever it was. It was just my brain immediately jumping to comparison. And really what it was doing was like I had some kind of program running that was essentially not allowing me to feel happy and content and proud, satisfied of the progress that we'd been making. And what happened to me, the way that this really sort of came to light, was one day during the program. So it's like a 12, 13 week thing, like very intensive. It's a lot of work. And one evening I was sitting at home on the couch after the day, and my wife looks over at me and she's like, "Why are you so miserable?" And I thought, well, at first I got really defensive. Right? I was like, no, I'm fine. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you're building this company. You just got into this amazing program. You've got tons of people rooting for you. All these things are going on in your life. You're supposed to be at the peak of your entrepreneur career, and you're sitting here, looking grumpy on the couch, right? As opposed to, basically what she was saying is, are you feeling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't, because I was all stuck in here. I was all stuck in my head, and I wasn't feeling it. And it took a while for me to get over my initial defensiveness and realize, oh, she's right. Like I'm limiting myself from feeling everything that's going on here, and that's not doing me any favors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not doing my team any favors, my company any favors, our prospects any good. Like, this is not good for anybody. And yet I'm stuck in this sort of behavior loop. And so once I started to understand that differently, I went out there and I did all the stuff. Like I went on meditation programs, I read the books and watched the videos and did this and that, like everything to try to figure out what was going on and how can I kind of improve my orientation and play a different game, put it that way. And along the way, what I realized was I'm not alone in this feeling. So, for example, I started mentoring a lot of other companies that were doing, similar stuff, or maybe that were earlier on in their journey. And, I would sit down with the CEO and he or she would come to me and all serious, and they'd want to talk about their pricing strategy or their go-to-market strategy or, whatever thing it was, like top of mind. And what it really came down to is they all wanted to figure out, when am I going to start feeling okay inside?
Mm.
And so I realized, okay, a lot of people are are talking like this. A lot of people are having these experiences. We don't have a vocabulary for this. We don't have a method for dealing with it. And that was sort of the genesis of Conscious Entrepreneur, because I thought, well, hey, a lot of people are building cool things and have really creative and really productive, yet are finding themselves trapped or having a lot of friction or blocked energy, or things aren't going the way they want. Let's, at the very least, bring a bunch of people together and talk about this and see if we can together solve the issues for people.
Yeah. And then how long from that moment to the first summit, how long was that?
The first summit was in 2022. So in May 2022 in Denver, and I sort of gelled the whole concept together the summer before. So it was like in August of 2021. So what's that, 10 months?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, putting together a conference takes a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts. The very first thing I did when it came time for the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit was, I had this thought, all right, if this is going to work, there's one person that I need to come and be my main keynote speaker year one. And the person that I reached out to, the person that was like, okay, I'm going to bet on him, is a guy by the name of Dr. Srikumar Rao. Now, he is this incredible mind, super wonderful person. I had found out about him on Mind Valley back during the pandemic. My wife got us a Mind Valley subscription, and I watched all of his stuff. And I don't normally take notes and go totally bonkers when I'm listening to someone just, talk in their videos. But with him, I did. And he's just tons of wisdom, tons of positive energy, tons of support, all emanating from this guy. And I was like, all right, him, he's the guy. So I randomly found his email on the internet, send him a cold email. Hey, I'm doing this thing in Denver. Do you want to come talk? Type of thing. And he replied within an hour and a half, something like that. And I was like, okay, that's the sign. And that's how it all began.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That's so great.
Yeah, I love I love it when you reach out and you can roll with an idea, and then you get some external confirmation that always helps things move forward. Of course, the idea really originated within you, but I would love to know, as you think of, Chantel and I, we learned quite a few things at the summit last year.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we learned was the mental health pledge, and how that's a piece of an opportunity and a resource for people if they achieve certain levels of funding and things like that. But how do you see, the concept of conscious entrepreneur, in 5 years from now, or in, how do you want the industry to change? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
The whole purpose of conscious entrepreneur is actually in the words. So the way I think about it is, the word conscious for me is awareness of where am I right now. So kind of like how you two think about this. Like, where am I right now? What am I feeling? Do I have awareness of my physical, mental, emotional state? Am I able to make the right types of decisions? Am I able to show up in a way that's beneficial to myself and the world? Et cetera. So that's what I mean by conscious. It's literally just awareness. Doesn't always mean I'm going to be making the right decisions, doing the right things, or getting the progress I want. But I have awareness, and I have tools, I have resources, I've got resilience in order for me to do so. And so the conscious piece, I don't think about it so much as tapping into universal wisdom and this kind of thing. I think about it much more as okay, do I know what's going on? Do I understand my drivers? Do I register my physical space and my environment and my relationships? And so do I understand how all this stuff is working? Do I have clarity? And the entrepreneur piece is really, really important, because there's so many things out there for tech companies or for some certain industry and so on. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is there's something really, really common among all founders, all entrepreneurs. And you could have founded a bank or a software company or a marketing agency or consulting company, or be a solopreneur, and you still have a lot of very common through lines about, you're trying to express creativity, you're trying to make an imprint on the world, you're trying to offer your gifts to the universe, you're trying to make a living, you've got a million things going on, you're trying to stay happy and sane and married, and all these things as you're going through and building your business. But entrepreneurs all have those kind of concerns and sort of attributes in common, if you will. And so what I want us to do is open the conversation so that people understand that when we talk about things like resilience or mindset, or be it health, physical health, mental health, whatever, when we talk about these things, these aren't things that we do later, right? So these aren't things that I'll get to eventually. Oh, once I sell my company, then I'll finally take a vacation. Once I achieve this, then I'll finally feel okay and worthy. Once this happens, then I'll be a good spouse or partner, for example. That's not so that's not the direction we want to go down. Instead, it's to show very clearly, and you saw this at the event, and this has been true for all of the summits that we've had. There are people out there who have achieved extraordinary things in their lives, and they're basically saying, this is a part of the process. This is not an afterthought. This is not something you do later, if, for example, you have to do this stuff. And so that's really what I want to be doing is making it clear that, it's a misconception to think that I'll get to all this stuff later, or I can do it when. And instead, it's I got to do this now. In fact, it's an essential ingredient to the success that I'm seeking in the outside world. And so that is a conversation that a lot of people are coming around to, but it's still not that common in the zeitgeist of today.
Yeah, I agree. I think Anna and I have this, well, I'll speak for myself. I feel a little bit like we live in a bubble because of what we do in our business and how we conduct business. And, a lot of what you're saying, and I'm looking at the 4 pillars of conscious entrepreneurship, which I think we could probably share a little bit about. And for me, it's of course, it's this deep sense of self as a whole And from our perspective, it's like, can I sense my nervous system? Can I sense am I safe? Do I feel confident? Do I feel grounded? And then noticing, to your point of like, well, how are my emotions, showing up? How is my thinking showing up? So it's this deep sense of knowing oneself that, at least for me, I feel like keeps me healthy, right? Even when things are really hard. But I do feel like I live in a little bit of a bubble. And I often think like, well, of course people understand this. And yet truly, most of them are potentially intellectually aware and yet not doing anything to embody the experience or grow that sense of self. So
yeah, I mean, there's this general idea that, it's an either or. So I'm either some like total maniac obsessed with growth and I'm going to burn the bridges and burn the candle at both ends and be a difficult person or whatever. Or, I'm sitting in a cave meditating or in an ashram and, it's all sort of like peace and love and light. And I don't think it needs to be that way. I think, in fact, we can learn from both. And the reason I bring that up is, for example, this year, 2025, the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit is all about exponential growth. So the whole theme is 10x growth, like you were saying, Chantal. So what that means is, if I get all this stuff, if I do the inner work, I have a much bigger impact in the outside world. And that's sort of the through line that I really want to evangelize for people is like, you want to do great things, start on the inside and then see what happens on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The first pillar of conscious entrepreneurship, as you have outlined it on your website, the conscious you, cultivating awareness and emotional resilience, aligning mind, body, and business decisions, leading with clarity, discipline, and purpose. And I feel like that's definitely resonant for us as the business we're in, and helping people build businesses and share their work in a way that is fully aligned and embodied. Any questions at the tip of your tongue, Anne, or do you want to dive into the 10X?
I'll ask one more question.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you first see someone shift from sort of not being conscious to becoming conscious, what are some of the behavior changes that you see in people? Or what are some of the early wins that people might experience throughout that?
Well, I'll just tell you some of the things that I've heard from attendees at the summit. So real live people who are not me. What people tell me, because literally sometimes people come up, they say, I had this amazing experience. And I always like to think, oh, it was because of some awesome content we shared. It was some, something we did really well. And it's like, no, it's never that. It's always some connection I made in the room, right? Or I had some insight or this thing that they were already thinking about. But I've talked to many attendees over the years who get that burst of courage or inspiration, that little nudge that they need to go make a change. And I think what the most powerful thing is the commitment that you make to yourself. And so that's the first part of pillar one of Conscious Entrepreneur, right? Is the commitment that you're making to the journey. And when you make that commitment, lo and behold, things start to happen. So it's funny because this links directly to, I know what we're going to talk about in a second, which is Ben Hardy's work. So Ben Hardy actually talks about the point of no return of an entrepreneur. So there is a point at which you're like, I'm all in, I'm doing this. And he also talks about entrepreneurial courage. And this all relates back to answer your question here, Ann, is because people see I'm not alone, I'm supported. There's a lot of avenues for creativity here. There's a lot of great things I can be doing. And there's a whole community of people here who are either doing it or on the journey, right, to it. And that makes a really big difference for the people who want to take action in their lives. And so that's something we've seen. Like people come and they say, oh, I was stuck in this job. I was stuck doing this thing I didn't like, or I felt like I plateaued, or I wasn't where I wanted to be. And then, either I met someone or I had a conversation or I had some insight or, I had this little nugget from a speaker on stage. And that then allowed me to then get the courage to make the shift or make the change that I wanted to see in my life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I really remember well about the time at the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit was just how much you leaned into community,
Mm.
and how you held that front and center. So I'm a big advocate of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
important. Like, I think there's a lot of value in the group support. We also, in terms of the format, I keep everybody in the same room the entire time.
Love that.
And I do that by design because I want us all to be having the same experience, right? Instead of like some people go out of one breakout and we go to another breakout, or whatever. Everyone's together so that we kind of stir up the energy and everyone's having the same feeling, and that creates a certain texture to the overall event.
Yeah. No, I appreciated that a lot. I was just thinking about entrepreneurial courage, and hi, this book has really gotten me to think. I mean, to be honest, and I just was thinking as you were speaking, I feel like I've been an entrepreneur for so long that I've lost my entrepreneurial courage. It's like, and this is literally the first time I'm having that thought. And I will have to sit with it and unpack it a little bit. But what I recognize, if I reflect back on being there last year, it is so important to be with others who are having the same experience. And Anne and I have known each other for a very long time, and we've been in business with each other for a long time in several different iterations. And I think even for us, it's so important to take our dynamic, break it up, shake it up, that was so fascinating too, to watch each of us kind of in the room and talking to people. And I can feel how that is a shift. It like can create a shift. And I can feel that as an entrepreneur for so long, I can feel the necessity of being in environments like that. To get the shift, to keep going, or to be able to, embrace a lot of the things that Ben is talking about in the book. But let's dive into that a little bit. What was one of your biggest ahas when you were reading the book? I know you've read it multiple times now.
Yeah, I have. It was actually recommended from several people in the conscious entrepreneur community. Had sort of brought it up over the course of a few months, and at first I thought, boy, this sounds kind of cheesy, 10x, 10x easier to us. Okay, maybe, kind of, sort of. And so my first instinct was like, no, whatever, I'll read it later. And then I picked it up, and I was like, oh wow, okay, interesting. And it was one of those moments where, like sometimes you read a book and just like smacking against your forehead. I was like, oh yeah, okay, all right, this is happening to me. And what I like about it is, so first, so the idea comes from Dan Sullivan. He's sort of the idea generator behind this, and then Ben Hardy is a psychologist, organizational psychologist, who essentially wrote the book with Dan. So Ben did all the writing based on Dan's concepts. And what I really took away from this was the psychology behind the mindset, right? Of like, we all get stuck in this thought, speaking for myself, I get stuck in this thought of like, I think small, right? Or I think I'm making small improvements and that's somehow going to change the trajectory of my life. If I do something 5% better, 2% better, 10% better, if I double something, then woo, look at that. And the main like overarching theme here was like, no, we can do better. We can think bigger. I have permission to think bigger. And if it's more than that, not only do I have permission to think bigger, I have an obligation to think bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an obligation to myself, to my family, to my team, to my business, and to the world to think bigger. Mm-hmm. And when I realized that, it was like, okay, this means step up, like, have open the aperture, increase the potential that's out there. And, it's just like what they say, if you aim for the moon, you might hit the stars, for example. So it doesn't mean that everything we do is going to get 10x overnight and I'm going to go from, here to there, like immediately. But what it means is my mindset is shifting to realize that if I want to have the biggest possible impact in the world, I have to change how I think about it. I have to change how I think about my offerings, who I'm doing it for, what they're going to get out of it, et cetera. And it's one of these sort of maximalist principles right? So the maximalist principle, like do it, do more, think bigger, be more aggressive, be more innovative, add more value, type of thing. And so I think what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'll speak from personal experience, but I'm sure that this resonates with a lot of others, is as an entrepreneur, got a great idea, you get out there and so you get some success and then a whole bunch of no's, a whole bunch of rejections, a whole bunch of punches in the face, and then we start like shrink in a little bit, right? So literally like physically we shrink in, our shoulders go in, and maybe hunch over a little bit, feel less confident in the world, and we're doing nobody any favors if that's the energy that we use in our businesses and in our lives. And if instead we say, okay, what do I need to do to change the psychology of that, to really have a big, interesting, exciting future ahead of me, right? So like, how do I get into that state? Because it's in that state that I can be my most creative, I can be my most effective, I can be more efficient and productive, whatever. All the things that I want to be doing are going to happen when I'm in that state. They're not going to happen when I'm sitting there thinking, oh, how do I make an extra, whatever, $1,000 from this? How do I do something really small, right? Versus like really trying to go for it. And so that the courage part, I think, is super important there. And that's what captivated me in the book. And I thought, wow, this is something we need to take to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Can I ask a question about that?
Mm.
Because I'm in agreement. Like I'm definitely a big thinker. And I've also heard like the opposite, right? Like, don't get distracted by shiny objects. Stay the course, be disciplined, right? So do you feel like that's just a seasonality within the entrepreneurial journey? Like sometimes you're in the season of maintaining and tweaking, and sometimes you're in the season of like, where do you sort of take those two different forms of advice, and where do you see them? I'm curious.
Especially in the startup world, there's this stigma around failure, right? And the stigma around failure then encourages people to stick with it, right? Stay longer, keep doing, keep going. And I've gotten stuck in this too, right? Like, all we need is one more X, one more year, one more customer, one more feature, one more this or one more that. And I think the point that Ben makes in the book is the only person you're fooling when you do that is yourself. And the only person who's paying the price is you, because you are giving up future opportunities. So basically it's an opportunity cost to continue what you're doing versus saying, no, forget it, I'm going all in on this, or I'm going to think bigger, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to do something with more impact. The only person who's suffering is you. You make up this whole story. I make up this whole story. Oh, here's how this is better for me. Here's how it's safer. Here's the best thing for my business, and so on. And all that's happening is my life is getting shorter every day, right? So it's like the clock is ticking on me every single day. And I can either go out there and try to make something great and think big and hopefully have a really positive impact, or I can keep grinding, right, in burnout mode, in burnout zone, like doing it that way. So that's how I see this stuff. But I think a lot of it comes from, we do get this advice out there that's like, keep going, and the winners never quit, and like, just look
Hard work.
just look at whatever company that like, then they had this incredible pivot and everything sucked, and then they had this pivot, now everything's amazing, and stuff like that. And yeah, those stories happen, but that's not the bulk of reality.
Yeah, there are some nuances here, that we don't have time to go into. But I think about like, if you're doing well, if the business is doing well,
sure,
and you are unhappy, it's not thriving, you're clearly stuck. I'm totally with you. And I have also witnessed people who have never experienced the kind of success, like really real stability in the business that they've built, because they're just squirreling. They can't really land. They don't have a strong purpose. They don't have strong goals, which kind of brings us back to the book itself. One of the things that I really appreciated. Well, I think also to point out, it sounds a lot like what Ben is talking about when he's talking about sunk cost, right? The sunk cost fallacy. And I can definitely feel that, like how much time and money and energy and intellectual property and blood, sweat, and tears I've put into something prevents me from letting it go. And that goes back to the entrepreneurial courage, I think. I'm just aware of that in myself. But let's just talk about, maybe to wrap things up, a little bit about how does the psychology between the 2X, or that linear progression of success or growth. He talks about grow fast or die. And Anne and I have had some experience with that. And the difference between the 10X, like when you set the goal high enough, and I love this, it reframes your options, right? The things that you're doing, it raises the floor. And as I was driving to Santa Barbara, that just hit me so hard. I was like, oh, of course, if the goal is hard enough, if it's big enough, strong enough, it simply sheds all the things that won't get you there. I mean, that really landed with me in terms of, how do I shift my frame? How do I shift what I'm attending to by shifting the goal? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, maybe for yourself, or what you see?
I think that's such an important concept, because when I commit to a bigger goal. So first of all, sometimes people have the question of like, what's the bigger goal? I can't think of anything bigger. I can't imagine what 10X looks like. And I asked Ben that when I was talking to him recently. He said, if you can't think about anything, just put a zero at the end of what you got.
Just add a zero, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, great. So think about it. If I have $1 million business, right? Fine, wonderful. What does a $10 million business look like? And all of a sudden, and by the way, he also time boxes this. So this is not 10X in infinity. This is not 10X before I die. He typically phrases it as 10X in